Greetings everyone, my name is Jace Perez, and welcome to the very first official review of 2025! Thank you so much. No, seriously, it's too kind. No, thank you. No, it's great. Okay, shut up. Alright, shut up. Okay, shut up! I'm very excited. So seeing how Sonic was on everybody's minds a while ago, thank you. I thought it'd be nice if we take a look back at Sonic's most recent video game adventure. Original video game adventure! Thank you! This is Sonic Superstars.
Yet another entry in the classic Sonic series, Superstars tries to take the classic formula perfected by the early Genesis games and Sonic Mania and adds tons of new features such as introducing new power-ups and abilities, and for the first time, having up to 4-player co-op during gameplay. Oh gee, does that sound familiar?
Now hold on a minute, I'm not trying to make the claim that Sonic Superstars is inherently a ripoff of Mario Wonder or the new Super Mario Bros. Series.
What I am saying is that I do find it kind of ironic that Sonic Team was trying to implement similar features to their flagship franchise around the same release window as Mario Wonder. And even when this game was first announced, I had a sneaking suspicion that this may be a subtle response to the new Super Mario Bros. Formula, with the whole idea of taking an older formula, making multiplayer a much more prominent feature, and introducing brand new methods of giving characters unique abilities. That and the fact that the two games were announced in the same month, as well as both games coming out in October, yeah, I think it's safe to say that Sonic Team and Artist may have been somewhat inspired by what Nintendo was keeping up their sleeve.
But we're not here to discuss the similarities between this game and Mario Wonder. That's a video for another day.
We're here to check out its gameplay, its new world, and see how the new mechanics and characters are incorporated and how they affect the game experience as a whole.
But before we really dive deep into the game itself, you're probably wondering to yourself, what the hell took you so long to get to this game? It's already over a year old! Well, the short answer is quite simple, really. It's because of this fucking thing!
Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna take the time to explain myself for a second. It won't take too long, but I'll leave a timestamp for any of you that want to skip my little rant that I'm gonna have right now. To make a long story short, I had no idea what I was doing with my Mario Wonder video. You know the saying of, if you can't explain it in simple terms, then you don't understand it enough? That was literally the entire video in a nutshell. I was way too caught up with being as thorough as possible with the game and going through every single minute detail, which not only created this ungodly runtime, but it also took literal months just to get the damn thing uploaded. Not to mention me constantly stretching out every point that I wanted to make with all these giant words and bombastic sayings like I was writing a fucking history exam.
You thought the Missile Meg's Wonder theme brought you to a newer plane of happiness? Well, this music straps you to the chest of a kamikaze and excels you to an even greater altitude of longevity and existence!
What the hell did you just say?
That video literally took so much out of me that I almost considered canceling production just because of how long it was taking to finish. And that's not even mentioning that the actual script for the video ended up being 69 pages long. I'm not even trying to make a sex joke. It was literally 69 pages. Just know that it was never my intention to make my first game review the length of a full-length feature film, and I deeply apologize for making a video that was incredibly long and had the runtime of a freaking documentary. Hell, some documentaries aren't even that long! But that video was my first attempt at a game review, and I am ultimately happy with how it turned out, well, for the most part. But there's just so many things that I want to improve on with my videos in the future. But hey, you know what they say, sometimes you just gotta take the time to just... Oh yeah! I got him! I fucking got him! I had to! I just fucking had...
Okay, so now that all that's out of the way, it's finally time to give this game an honest and fair look, with its brand new story, its brand new mechanics, and to see if it stands out from any of the classic Sonic games and any of the earlier games placed in the series. So without further ado, let's finally take a look at Sonic Superstars. See, now that didn't take 20 pages to write, now did it?
Huh, well, that's weird. The game doesn't start up with the classic Sega voice recording. Huh, well, don't worry, I can fix that. Ah, much better. Okay. When you first start up the game, you're greeted by this really beautifully animated intro sequence. It's very reminiscent of the cutscenes in Sonic Mania and Sonic Origins, which means it's super high quality and really well done. I'll give the game this, it does start off by setting the bar very high. There's 5 save files for you to choose from in 3 game modes: Story Mode, Battle Mode, and Time Attack. We'll touch on the other modes later on, but we're of course gonna mainly stick to the main Story Mode campaign. And lastly, there's 4 characters for you to play as: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and yes, even Amy Rose. I really appreciate Sonic Team's recent attempts to make more of a prominent character recently alongside the original trio of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. They also did this in Sonic Origins, which I feel makes her feel more welcome with the original cast of playable characters. But enough of the menus, let's kick things off with the plot. Eggman is up to his old schemes again, doing what he does best, encapsulating helpless little animals and putting them inside of badniks. Although some of them don't seem to look so little anymore. In fact, it looks like they've really let themselves go. I mean, Jesus! Why are they so bloated now? It looks like they got injected by the big Chungus serum or something. But Eggman isn't alone this time, as he's managed to get help from none other than Fang the Sniper. Or is it Knack the Weasel? No, who cares? He gives him in exchange to enslave more animal buddies right when the doctor catches a glimpse of Sonic on his way to stop him and... well, yeah, that's really it. Eggman's being evil and Sonic's gonna go stop him. No hard-boiled heavies, no time travel, no ancient prophecy deciding the fate of the universe and mankind as we know it. It's probably the most basic story a Sonic game's ever had in a really long time. Not inherently a bad choice though, as they most likely wanted to focus more on the new mechanics and features that are found in the gameplay itself. And it's also nice that they decided to take a break from the super epic high-stakes storylines that most Sonic games are already known for. Along with Fang comes this adorable new sidekick and newcomer to the series, Trip, who spends the majority of the game stumbling behind Fang and Eggman before eventually turning sides and teaming up with Sonic and friends. I think she makes for a really great addition to the game with her shy, timid nature, but still needing to kick ass whenever she needs to. She's almost like a reserved version of Styx from Sonic Boom, and it's the complete opposite when it comes to her overall character and personality. I really hope they end up making her more of an integral character in the series. She seems like she'd be a fun addition to the main cast of Sonic characters. She does end up having a bigger role in the game itself, but we're gonna get to that later on. We begin the first stage in Bridge Island Zone and... oh, wait. Oh my god.
The game doesn't start in Green Hill Zone. The game doesn't start in Green Hill Zone. The game doesn't start in Green Hill Zone!
Finally, a classic Sonic game that doesn't just resort to starting at Green Hill Zone! I mean, sure, it still shares some characteristics of Green Hill, but this happens so rarely that I'll take what I can get. The controls for this game feel very similar to Sonic Mania's controls, with the way the physics are designed to emulate the classic games, with even the drop dash making a comeback. The same also goes for the rest of the playable characters too, except for Amy, who takes her control scheme from Sonic Origins, with her being able to use her hammer for attacks and for making double jumps. As well as being the first zone in the game, Bridge Island also introduces tons of new gameplay mechanics. Now whenever you pass a checkpoint with 50 rings, you're taken to these bonus areas that directly take inspiration from the infamous special stages from Sonic 1. Now despite these special stages sort of having a lackluster reputation, these areas actually aren't as bad as I thought they would be. For one thing, it actually moves at a decent frame rate, and the screen is a lot further back, with the backgrounds being a lot less distracting than in the original stages. As such, they're a lot easier to control and a lot less disorienting. That being said, I do kinda have a soft spot for the original backgrounds though. Sure, they were kinda like if the programmers decided to overdose on an entire cartel's worth of LSD, but they still kinda had a charm to them, you know? Like, they were artistically freaky. But instead of going to these stages to grab a Chaos Emerald, you're grabbing golden medallions in order to get through each section. These medallions are sprinkled everywhere throughout the game, with them being in secret areas, secret stages, and you're even rewarded with them every time you grab 100 rings. Now, you're probably wondering, why would I care about collecting all these coins? I mean, what could I even do with them? Well, I'm so glad you asked. On each world map, there's an area that's able to take you to the game's shop, which is the area that lets you spend all those coins you collect. Why? Well, to customize parts for your very own robot OC, of course. You're able to spend coins on any cosmetics that you want for your robot, with tons of character specific parts and even being able to buy different spray paints to color specific parts of your robot character. So you can either make a one-to-one robot recreation of a specific character, or just go insane and make your own robotic masterpiece. Once you're done designing your new robot friend, you're able to use them in the game's battle mode, where you're able to use them to play competitive mini-games with other players. They're not quite as good as some of the other battle modes from previous games, most notably Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but they are decent enough and you might have a fun time trying them out with multiple players. But can somebody please explain to me why is it whenever you hit an item box in the battle mode, the alert sound from Metal Gear Solid plays?
What was that noise?
And yeah, I know the battle mode has Green Hill Zone as a stage, but it's not in the main game, so it still counts, alright? We'll go back to the gold medals in a bit, but for now, let's talk about the game's special stages. In each stage, there are large hidden rings scattered through secret areas similar to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But the special stages themselves are a completely different ball game. Get it? Balls. Each special stage takes you on an endless void with blue spheres, which I feel can only be described as abstract polygon limbo. Like I'm expecting a Tron spaceship to come flying out of nowhere or something. In order to complete each special stage, you have to swing through an onslaught of blue spheres and speed boosters in order to chase down the floating Chaos Emerald that flies in a set path. You're able to target the closest blue sphere or speed booster you swing towards, and once you get close enough to the emerald, you're able to perform a homing attack to finally grab it. There's also a ton of hazards such as spike bombs and crystal walls that might slow you down when you're going after the emeralds. Just like in Sonic Mania, rings act as your time limit. The more rings you collect, the more seconds you have, and if you run out of rings, well then say hello to Purgatory. Though it was a little confusing entering the special stages for the first time trying to figure out how the physics worked, I found the swinging mechanic to be very intuitive and I was able to get a better grasp on controlling the motion as the special stages went on. There's also different variations of these stages where you jump into giant blue rings placed in each stage where you're able to grab more medals as well as being a lot shorter to get through. And even after you complete a standard special stage, it turns into a blue ring whenever you choose to replay a particular act. Once you actually grab a Chaos Emerald from a special stage, instead of just being added to a counter that keeps track of all the emeralds you collected, you actually get a unique ability with each individual emerald. So after over 3 decades of the emeralds just serving as the main collectibles in every single Sonic game ever made, this is the first time where we actually get full individual use out of each emerald in a game. Not only does this new mechanic make the Chaos Emeralds much more prominent in regards to the gameplay, but it actually entices you to want to go after all the emeralds in order to try every new ability that comes with each one. Each ability is able to be equipped by pressing the right shoulder button during a stage. The abilities themselves are also incredibly creative, with each of them having their own mechanic that ranges from enhancing your moveset to helping you find new ways to find secrets in a particular act. For example, the blue emerald gives you the Avatar ability, which allows you to create multiple clones of yourself to take out a full screen of enemies. This makes it so you can either knock out an act quicker than usual by getting rid of all the bullshit you don't want to deal with, or it can be useful to take a couple of early hits from a boss that you're either having trouble on, or again, just want to get over with quickly. Now compare this to the Vision ability, which allows you to see hidden platforms that are only visible when you equip the Emerald. This is only really useful for when there's a more out of reach area that you might have trouble getting to normally. The rest of the abilities also tend to follow these two categories for differing gameplay styles. The Bullet ability lets you travel through the air with short bursts of speed. The Water ability lets you swim easier in large bodies of water, which is truly a freaking godsend for a Sonic game. Slow ability, which slows down the game to make timing a lot more easier, and the Extra ability, which gives each character their own specific attack, with Sonic getting his signature homing attack, Tails being able to summon tornadoes, Knuckles being able to create energy blasts from his fists, and Amy being able to throw multiple hammers, which works almost exactly like the Hammer Bros suit from Mario 3. And hey, speaking of Mario, the way Mario Wonder and Superstars differs with handling abilities is definitely worth mentioning. I know I said I wasn't going to compare these two games in this video, but it will be necessary in order to get my point across, so I'll be brief. Rather than just selecting one ability before entering the stage like in Mario Wonder, you're able to select multiple abilities during an actual zone. This makes it so that the ability you choose doesn't dictate how you manage to tackle the entire stage as a whole, but rather how you would take on a particular section. This is also helped by the fact that unlike Mario Wonder, each ability has a time limit, which prevents you from just spamming every ability as much as you fucking please. And lastly, both games have abilities that are mainly split into ones that can help your movement, and others that are more useful for finding other hidden artifacts or for going for 100%, even though Superstars has a literal fraction of the amount of abilities seen in Mario Wonder. Now personally, I think both games handled this gameplay mechanic really well, but if I had to choose, I would probably say Mario Wonder handles the ability gimmick a little bit better, as I think one set ability present throughout the entire stage is better than just having limited use for every power that are only really useful in some areas of stages. Which is just further accentuated by the fact that games sometimes prompts you to use a certain ability rather than trying to see what ability fits in a certain situation on your own. But despite the few missteps, the introduction of the abilities makes for a fantastic gameplay style that just adds to the uniqueness of this game's gameplay as a whole. They add tons of versatility for when it comes to playing these stages, and for spicing up the new mechanics and your moveset. So that covers all the abilities, but now it's time to get into the boss battles. Each act comes a unique boss fight that completes each zone, again similar to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which on one hand can be a great way to expand the total number of bosses and having tons of great fights in a shorter amount of time, as opposed to only having one boss at the very end of a zone. But if the bosses turn out to be tedious and repetitive, then it can lead to the bosses feeling a lot more monotonous as the game goes on. And the bosses in this game, well, yeah, they leave a little to be desired. Now, it's not to say that all these bosses are god-awful or anything, well, except for a few exceptions we'll be getting to soon, but the majority of the main story bosses all just have incredibly underwhelming difficulty, with most of them having attack patterns that are all incredibly easy to figure out. I don't know if it's the game itself or I just suddenly magically got better at platformers, but I don't even remember the older games having bosses this easy throughout the entire game. Okay, to be fair, not every boss has incredibly low difficulty. Some of them are legitimately challenging and have tons of great mechanics implemented throughout the fight. Like the boss in Speed Jungle Act 2 has you avoiding Eggman and his giant wrecking ball as he tries to impale you with his giant metal schlong.
Oh, come on. What else is this supposed to look like? They put it in the worst spot you could possibly imagine.
Mwah! Good night, everybody.
There's parts in the fight where you need to use his own attack against him by jumping on his appendage to eventually damage him with his own barbed tip.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, shut up!
He also launches rockets that you need to knock back towards him to damage him and finally take out the boss. The mechanics that the boss introduces actually enhances the overall difficulty, making for a more memorable boss fight in the process. But the vast majority of the bosses all feel like they're straining too far back from having their original contents be utilized to their full potential. And so most of the bosses all suffer from underperforming difficulty and actually standing out from some of the older bosses in the series. Now don't take that as me saying I necessarily find all the main story bosses to be unenjoyable or bad in any way. I would have just preferred if they took more time to truly perfect the bosses and have them be more properly thought out and memorable. Another example of a great boss concept is the Act 1 boss in Sky Temple Zone, where you need to dodge tons of saw blades while free falling from a giant propeller that thrashes you all around the stage, as well as needing to jump on tons of floating rocks in order to land attacks to finish the boss. Again, a really fun concept for a boss, but the main thing that really holds this boss back is the pacing. It feels like with every hit, the game takes forever to start the next phase again, and just when you think the fight's over, it drags on for another 10 minutes. Once again, a really good concept that just barely underdelivers with its execution, which unfortunately makes up the majority of the bosses that are found in this game. Which is a shame, because I genuinely love a lot of the concepts that come with each fight, it's just the execution for most of the fights that makes them come across as underwhelming. The bosses are decent enough for what they are, I just wish there was more time and effort put into them. Another thing in this game that really stands out from the other ones in the series is this game's world map. With previous games, they would usually give you a set number of acts in each zone that you would have to clear to get from one zone to the next. Here things are done a little bit differently, and by a little different, I mean they decided to base the world map on the one from Sonic Generations, weirdly enough. The layout is almost identical, albeit at a much smaller scale. It still requires you to physically travel to a specific zone rather than just selecting one from a menu. And with each zone you complete, another one is added to the map, expanding more of the hub world until all the zones are fully completed. But unlike the vast majority of Sonic games where there's typically 2 or 3 acts that make up the duration of every zone in the game, the number of acts that make up each zone is basically whatever the game feels like. Some zones have 3 acts, some zones have 2 acts, and some even just have 1. I don't know why they decided to give each zone a completely different number of acts when they could have just stuck to one unified number of acts throughout the entire game. Not only would that have made the overall structure of the zones much more cohesive, but it also would have had the durations of each zone feel much more consistent too. As stated before, there are some acts that act as bonus areas where you have a chance of collecting more medallions, but there's also times where you play character-specific stages where you play as some of the other playable characters. Which means even if you never change your character throughout the entire game, you will still get the chance to play as every character.
Well now, isn't that just convenient?
But despite the inconsistency regarding the number of acts in each zone, it doesn't affect the game in a negative or major way. The game still manages to have each zone last a considerable amount of time, even if some acts have less than others. The zones themselves are all super vibrant and really well designed, with each of them having their own unique level mechanics that help them stand out from each other apart from just their aesthetics and level design. But this game doesn't directly repurpose old zones like in Sonic Mania, nor do they make a ton of half-assed remakes of previous zones like in Sonic 4. Rather, each of them pay homage to previous zones such as Casino Night and Sandopolis, but still manage to have their own identity from any of the previous zones that they may be based on. For example, Speed Jungle borrows elements from the past version of Stardust Speedway within its level design and set pieces. The same goes for Sand Sanctuary with its ties to Sandopolis, except now it's a lot less disorienting. And Pinball Carnival borrows elements from Casino Night, because it's literal law that there must be a casino-themed zone in every Sonic game ever made. Seriously, it's like part of the 10 Commandments or something. But not all of them are modified renditions of older zones. Some of them are actually exclusive to the game itself. Press Factory Act 1 has this really cool gameplay mechanic where you need to constantly hit switches in order to turn down the pressure meter to avoid the stage from exploding, which kills you instantly like a fucking suicide bomb. There's Golden Capital where the game takes a break from being a Sonic the Hedgehog game and becomes a segment straight out of New Super Mario Bros. 2. But I think the best example of an original stage, and one that just happens to be my favorite in the whole game, is Cyberspace Zone. It may only be a single act long, but I'll be damned if this isn't one of the most stylistic Sonic stages I've ever seen. The set pieces and art direction are all fantastic and really fit the whole retro yet futuristic vibe they were trying to go for. There's vortexes that turns your character into a stylized Genesis style sprite from the early Sonic games. Which, yes, I am fully aware that they only put this in the game to cater to the fans of the older games just like myself, but god damn it, they just look so awesome, I can't help but love them! This stage also has you transform into different forms that also change your gameplay style. The jellyfish lets you swim through orbinauts and lasers, the rocket lets you speed through boosters and dodge incoming neon Rubik's cubes, and the mouse transformation lets you climb on a set path avoiding red cats. But one thing that kind of ruins some of these transformations are, once again, the overall executions. The mouse transformation in particular. You constantly have to avoid these cats that are placed sporadically on these intersecting paths, but the screen is positioned in such a way that it makes it near impossible to predict their patterns, and they all just kind of fly on screen whenever they feel like. And when you get hit by any of them, you don't just lose your rings, no. You fucking fall all the way to the bottom and have to climb back up all over again. And there's no way to kill them either, so you're just forced to avoid them and having to constantly deal with the falling, and the climbing, and the falling, and the climbing, and the falling, and the climbing, and yeah, you get the idea. It's so unbelievably frustrating. It almost gives me paranoid flashbacks back to that Mappy arcade game. Yeah. But even with these few missteps, they're honestly a rare occurrence, and almost every stage has little to no technical problems in their overall designs. Every zone has its own set of original set pieces that really push this game's art direction, with each of them having their own level mechanics that enhance the vibe of not only the setting, but the sort of experimental direction of the game as a whole, which I feel like is a good transition to talk about this game's overall presentation. I already talked about the animated cutscenes, but the actual in-game graphics still retain a vibrant stylized art style that's pretty in line with the rest of the classic Sonic games. And while Sonic Mania did a fantastic job emulating the graphical style of the Genesis games, this feels more like a direct reimagining of the original sprites, with the game having its own unique world layout. Each zone also has a significant amount of detail that actually gives these areas more of a grander scope than what you might expect to see at face-to-face value as each of the stages go on. My only real gripe when it comes to the graphics is I feel like the animation can be a little bit on the lifeless side. All the characters have this sort of lifeless expression throughout the game and they tend to feel really stiff when they're actually in motion. Now it's not too noticeable and it doesn't ruin the game or anything, I just feel like this game could have really benefited with more lively animation, so it can complement the already vast and lively setting that the game takes place in. As for the music, it's also kind of a mixed bag. None of the songs are outright terrible, but none of them are really memorable either. There are some good tracks like Bridge Island Zone or Golden Capital Zone, but a large majority of them all fall pretty flat when it comes to their impact after you play the game. Each song at least fits the vibe of their respective zone, which is a good thing, but they're not going to get stuck in your head or have incredibly catchy melodies that really makes them stand out. But the biggest problem with the music for me personally is their over-reliance on that annoying ass fake Genesis bass drum. You know, the one that sounds like... This game had a long list of main composers for the game's soundtrack, one of them being Jun Sano, the same composer for Sonic 4 episodes 1 and 2. And if you haven't already noticed, those games use this bass drum quite a lot. While this game's music isn't anywhere near as bad as those games, whenever they do use that fake kick drum, it's very noticeable and extremely jarring. I get they're trying to emulate the classic Genesis twang from the older games, but whenever they do use it, it just sounds super artificial and really out of place. But again, I wouldn't call the soundtrack bad by any means, and it really is just that one gripe I really do have. I just don't find them to be all that memorable after playing the game. Like, I honestly couldn't tell you the melody for Pinball Carnival, Sky Temple, or even Cyber Chase off the top of my head. Which is a shame, because whenever you do go back to listen to these tracks, they all sound pretty decent with good composition and decent instrumentation. They just don't have that much sticking power when compared to the older soundtracks of the series. But now that we got the main aspects of the story mode out of the way, it's finally time to talk about the game's final stage and the final boss of the main story mode campaign. At the beginning of Act 2 of Frozen Base Zone, after jumping in your own Eggmobile, the game takes an immediate shift in gameplay where the game decides that it wants to become an arcade-style shooter out of complete nowhere. It literally feels like the game just turned into a segment straight out of Cuphead or something. The segment is also really short, like about the same length as Sky Chase Zone from Sonic 2. The zone mainly consists of continuously shooting 10 of these enemy spawning badniks, with the zone ending with a boss that is, I'm not even kidding, once again taken straight out of Cuphead. Well, I guess people always did compare Dr. Call to Dr. Eggman, so I guess it comes full circle? After finishing up the two bosses, you fly straight into the Doctor's spaceship, where you begin Egg Fortress Zone. For the most part, it's a pretty standard final zone, except now it has this weird anti-gravity mechanic that has you slowly dodge lasers in some areas, but the zone doesn't get too interesting until you finish the first act, where the second act has you play the stage again, except now it's in reverse. Which sounds like a cool idea at first, until you realize that this zone was not made for this mechanic in mind. Half the time you're either falling into pits, or you're just going in circles trying to make sure you don't accidentally end up where you've already been. It just ends up making the zone feel really tedious because you're essentially just playing the same stage all over again, just with it feeling slightly more randomized with the new disorienting layout. I really don't understand why they couldn't just make a unique stage for Act 2, rather than just having an immediate replay of a stage that you just finished. And speaking of tedious, let's talk about that final boss. After reaching the final checkpoint, Eggman comes out and you soon drop down to the stage arena, where Eggman reveals a giant rendition of the Death Egg robot. Again, Christ, how many times are they gonna follow this template? They couldn't even be bothered to make a brand new design. It just looks like they stuck the first robot in a samurai suit and called it a day. The first phase mainly consists of you launching back blue rockets at the Doctor's cranium, but you can't just hit it whenever you see a blue rocket available. That would make way too much sense. You have to specifically line yourself up to where you're behind him, and then you can launch a rocket back at him. There's also glowing walls that come from time to time, but there's also segments where he smashes the ground so where it comes apart, or he takes off a small section of the ground and breaks the surrounding area, along with spawning tons of lightning balls in the process. And remember how I talked about the pacing in each boss being pretty problematic? Well, not even this boss is an exception to this rule. In fact, every aspect that's wrong with the other main bosses in the game applies to this boss as well. There's barely any sort of challenge after you figure out what to do after 10 seconds, and it feels like the phases go on way longer than they need to. Just when you think you're finally gonna land the last hit, it just keeps on repeating itself. His second phase has you avoiding his attacks as he chases after you. He'll swing both his arms down, which prompts you to attack him, as well as shooting 3 sections of lasers and more electrical spheres, with you avoiding them with the same gravity mechanic from before. So after all of this chaos, is there even a thrilling conclusion to what is supposed to be the final boss of the entire game? Not really, it just kinda stops. Like, as if the whole boss had enough of itself and decided to end prematurely, which ends up making the boss feel incredibly underwhelming, as if it wasn't enough already. After finishing the final boss, you're shown another short animation that's actually unique to each character depending on who you play as the game ends. And while that concludes the main story mode, there's still 2 more game modes left to talk about. Remember how I said Trip would become a more important character in the game later on? Well, after finishing the main story mode, you're able to unlock and play Trip's story, which acts as this game's hard mode. And by hard mode, I mean that there's more spikes placed everywhere, having 1 unique boss, and that's about it. But despite all that, it's essentially the same game, just having more focus placed on Trip, similar to when you play as Knuckles in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But arguably the best and most important part about Trip's story is, well, Trip herself. She's able to perform double jumps and scale up certain walls when in her spike form. Not really sure why she feels the need to jump like Vector from Knuckles Chaotix, but hey, I think it looks cool and it makes her more unique. She even turns into a dragon once you grab all the Chaos Emeralds, which just looks freaking adorable. I mean, just look at her, dude. While the vast majority of her campaign is identical to the main story mode, some things are slightly tweaked in some ways, such as parts of the level design, and I noticed that the bosses have slightly faster AI than in the actual story mode. But the biggest thing this mode changes from the main game is actually the final boss. Instead of fighting Eggman and his giant Dragon Warrior-esque Death Egg robot, you fight Fang and his fighter jet, to which he soon resorts to attacking you in his own giant mech. And this boss is like if someone tried to take the final boss from the main story mode, tried to fix it, but ended up making it arbitrarily worse. Dear lord, if you thought the Death Egg robot was overly compensated and drawn out, you are sorely mistaken. The fight starts off by Fang riding around in his vehicle, launching tons of his rocket missiles, followed by a barrage of lasers that he slowly hurtles towards you. He then makes a ton of clones of himself and repeats the whole pattern for what feels like 45 goddamn years. And every single time you land a hit on the bastard, it takes like 15 minutes for the game to process and move on to the next pattern of attacks.
Yes, alright, finally got one. Shit. God fucking damn it!
After finally getting past his long-ass first phase, he starts to attack you in his giant mech where he launches hundreds of badniks, bouncing projectiles, and sets of vortexes that trap you as he tries to berate you with what looks like giant wooden wine corks. And if you get stuck in any of these things, you might as well just kill yourself unless if you have the reflexes to spam every button known to humanity on the controller. And you gotta love how whenever you get hit by one of the corks, the game doesn't just kill you, but face plants you directly onto the camera, as if they're rubbing it in. Dicks. He then tries to also take apart sections from the ground just like the Death Egg robot, only this time it's done with ultra fast reflexes and with 0 warning. Seriously, like, good freaking luck trying to avoid anything in this boss. And just like its predecessor, the boss doesn't have any real conclusion. It just kind of ends when it decides it's had enough of itself. This boss takes nearly 10 minutes to finish, and that's if you actually know what you're doing the first time. It's slow, it's tedious, and it's incredibly unforgiving. And while I gave most of the bosses in this game the benefit of the doubt, There is almost nothing redeemable about this thing. Now, I would call this the worst boss in the entire game, but believe it or not, there's something even worse. Now, I'm just gonna put a spoiler warning for the last story segment, as this only plays after you fully complete both campaigns. I mean, I know the game's over a year old, but hey, maybe someone's taken just as long to get to the game as I did. So I'll put this up just in case. So, spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Fuck this dragon! After you collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds, you're able to play this game's final story mode, where the game takes you to the actual worst boss of the entire game, this dragon. Okay, let's just start with the obvious. Where in the hell did this thing even come from? He's never alluded to, never mentioned, never referenced. He literally appears out of nowhere. Now, I am aware that more context was probably given to him in the animated series that released alongside this game, but that shouldn't be the case if I want to get more context from a character in a video game. That'd be like if for the original Mario Bros. There was a top secret boss that isn't anywhere in the game's manual, until you find out later that you had to look in a very specific issue of Nintendo Power to even be aware that there was a true final boss. But even ignoring all that, this boss is still god-awful. The entirety of the boss all relies on pure luck and good RNG, which, for the people that don't know, does not make for a fun boss. It's trying to be like the Doomsday Zone from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where you play as Super Sonic and constantly have to collect rings in order to maintain your super form, but they mess it up so bad. Instead of having small sets of rings placed around the stage, they're all scattered and placed like 10 feet apart from each other. Occasionally other characters will show up and give you 10 extra rings when you go by them, but they rarely show up whenever you actually need them to fill up your ring counter. And if you run out of rings, you lose your super form and have to start the fight from the very beginning. And this thing's attack patterns are all over the place. He starts off by hurling tons of black holes at you that kill you instantly if you enter them. It doesn't even give you a chance to escape from any of them. He'll then go to the background and launch tons of boulders in the foreground that you have to fire back at him. There's also times where he gets into a ball formation and tries to stun you in place, with you having to avoid him for what feels like 15 minutes. And you can't attack him while he's doing this either, so you just have to wait for him to endlessly fly across the screen and start launching black holes before even having a chance to attack him. Most of the time, the boulders you need to hit are just right off screen of your current position, so you have to frantically search before you completely fuck up your chance of landing a hit on him. And you only get 2 chances to do so, otherwise he shoots this clusterfuck of crystals that are near impossible to not get completely trampled over. And if you thought this asswipe couldn't get any more frustrating, his second phase doesn't fare much better. After a transformation, he starts breathing fireballs that vary in size, creating giant whirlpools that stun you, and swiping at you with his giant makeshift hands. And they give you 0 indication of what you have to do to actually attack him during this stage. How was I supposed to know, my first time playing, that you have to run headfirst into one of his hands after he tries to hit you with one? I'm obviously gonna try to avoid them, because if I get touched by them, it slows me down and risks me losing my hard-earned rings. And just when you think you're finally gonna see the end of this grueling torment, out of complete fucking nowhere does he decide to throw more boulders that you have to knock back. And even if you're 1 nanosecond off, it will not register. And at this point, there's barely any rings to keep you afloat, so you don't got time to make any mistakes. After giving him permanent brain damage, he then spews a giant stream of radioactive vomits, which lasts for 30 seconds, there's no rings, and it just sets you up for failure because you wasted them all in your long-ass segments like AB4. It's fucking bullshit!
You know what? Fuck this game. And fuck this Figment the Dragon piece of shit too. I swear to God, it's not even worth playing the rest of the game anymore. Like, I'm fucking done. Like, I can't even fucking deal with this shit. This is... Finish the game. I made it this far.
After getting past his oral piss stream, the final segment involves giving the dragon one final blow with a basic homing attack. Guess they decided to give you some freaking mercy. Land the final blow and finally put an end to this thing. Thank fucking God. Ugh. There are technically worse bosses in the whole series, but the sheer amount of frustration and tedium definitely puts it up there as being one of the worst classic Sonic boss fights I've ever played. Well, at least they saved it for the very end. Makes it feel a lot more rewarding. With Sonic defeating the giant purple tumor, Trip seals him inside the Black Onyx, finally putting an end to the reign of terror. Sonic and friends all celebrate their victory, where the game ends and has me feeling completely ambivalent.
I think it's safe to say that I have mixed feelings about this game. On one hand, it does things that I think are really well done. The art direction is great, the controls are decent, and for the most part, the mechanics that are added to the game are handled incredibly nicely. Like the new special stages and especially the new abilities are handled in such a way that makes it feel really unique to the other games in the series.
But it also underperforms in a lot of its major elements too. Elements that greatly affect the overall course and flow of the game. I genuinely want to like it more than I do, as it has tons of great things going for it. It just has flaws that keep it from being as amazing as it could be. But despite its many unfortunate downsides, I don't consider it a bad game, as the positives do thankfully outweigh the negatives. The game still retains its overall presentation and creative concepts for gameplay. Hell, even the not so good stuff still shows signs of having creative concepts even if it doesn't always work. Is this game gonna revolutionize the future of classic Sonic games? No. Is it gonna introduce any mainstay mechanics to the series? Probably not. But again, it's not trying to. The whole game's designed to be another fun callback to the classics, with newly given mechanics to make for a more experimental but still enjoyable experience. Another well-polished entry in the classic Sonic series, with tons of great new mechanics added for a more unique adventure. And I think it handles that concept and its new mechanics pretty damn well.
I'm Jace Perez, keep drawing and drawing, and you'll get... Hello? Outside? In the front? Why? Hey, listen, let me call you back, alright? I'll talk to you later. Shit. Well, without further ado, let's take a look at Sonic Superstars. See, look, now that didn't take... Oh, no. Oh, no. No.